Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional from New Delhi, India, Poonam Barua. Poonam, welcome to the show. Poonam is the Chief Executive Officer of WILL Forum. She's the founder chairman for Forum for Women in Leadership. She's an author of a book titled Leadership by Proxy, The Story of Women in Corporate India. She's an independent board director, an economist, and a Salzburg Global Fellow. So, Poonam, my first question for you. You have worked across economics, public policy, corporate leadership, and institution building. What moments have most shaped your own leadership philosophy?
Thank you very much for inviting me to your wonderful podcast. It's always a pleasure to pollinate new minds and talk about what we will do perhaps collectively as a vision for the future. So, what is it that most shapes your leadership philosophy? So, the first thing is, what is your leadership philosophy today? And the leadership philosophy is one that evolves over time. It's never the same. And I think that in terms of leadership philosophy, the only one thing, and it's a very small sentence, is that it has to make the world a better place. That's very important for me as a leader. That's the philosophy. What is the meaning of the world a better place? It means that, there must be diversity of ideas, people must be opening to talk, there must be a progressive movement, there must be forward thinking, there must be productive societies, people must be supporting each other, there should be open minds. We must all treasure the gifts of nature that have been given to us. There must be equal opportunity. That is the philosophy of leadership that I think makes it both strategic in the long term and purposeful in the heart. So, if you blend the two, that's the philosophy of leadership. Now, the problem is that the leadership has now been boxed into these tiny little boxes. You got the B school kind of leadership that only knows these little boxes, and they're called frameworks, and there's so linear thinking. And then there are these boxes. You've got the Davos style of leadership, where you got all these CEOs and people who just want a bigger piece of the pie. Without necessarily growing the pie itself. And then you will have the CXOs and the governance types. So there are little boxes in leadership. That is not the reality. The reality is that leadership is a kaleidoscope. It's got to have different colors. You got to be able to turn it yourself every time and see a different color. That kind of collective thinking is the only leadership that will take us forward. And I strongly urge everybody to get out of the little boxes of leadership and try to evolve something which is more spacious.
Very interesting.
So, just on your question of what shapes this, it doesn't come to you immediately. It shapes over time.
Sure.
And one of the things is that in school, for example, if I just think of my early days, I was busy in the library all the time, borrowing books on H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds, 1984. We're talking about 8th and 9th grade. I'm busy reading George Orwell, Animal Farm. These are the things that were shaping my thinking. Look at these visionaries. Look at what they're writing. So vision is such an important part of leadership. And you got to bring in a vision. And it doesn't have to be vision of dollars or vision of, it's a vision.
Sure.
And the second part that influenced me very much was, going to the Delhi School of Economics, where I understood productivity as an economist. That also shapes your leadership. What is productivity? What is sustainability? What is consumerism? How do we make wealth? What is wealth creation? What is innovation? Who's Joseph Schumpeter? Who's Adam Smith? What was the wealth creation that they were talking about? That shaped a lot of my thinking. And then lastly, I must mention people like Carl Sagan, who I've been reading, when I was early in my forward-thinking process at the American Center. I would just load in all the videos of Carl Sagan on the cosmos so that your leadership dwells into the arena of universe, the cosmos. Who are we? What is this pale blue dot in which we are sitting? These are the kind of things that have shaped my leadership philosophy.
Well said. Well said. And what originally motivated you to focus on your life's work on women in leadership, especially at a time when the conversation was far quieter than it
Mhm.
is today?
Well, I'm going to pick up my book because, the very opening of my book is called this I'm the Storm in the Teacup.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm the storm in the teacup, and I've just
Mhm.
written one book, and I wrote it in 45 days because I knew exactly what I wanted to write. And the only reason why I wrote the book was because I will forget what I'm saying. Not because I'm going to forget it, but because I reboot every day, because my
Mhm.
leadership evolves and I'm never going to remember.
Mhm.
And right in the beginning, it says, do you have a story? Which is exactly what you're asking me. Why did you start the Forum for Women in Leadership? And I'm just going to quote two lines where it says, I have no story to tell.
Mhm.
I have no motivation. There is no trigger. And I have no mentors and I have no sponsors.
Mhm.
But when a good job needs to be done, you just get up and you do it.
Mhm.
You don't need motivation to do a good job.
Mhm.
You need motivation to do a bad job. Yes, I get that.
Mhm.
So, when you want to see the outcome of what you're trying to do, you actually don't need a trigger or a motivation. And I've been seeing for a long time that, wherever I was, whether I am debating, I'd say in Stevens College as a young girl, there's just men in the room. Whether I'm going, as a SARC chamber consultant in my early days, I'm always looked at as the spouse, even though I'm the speaker. I'm put into the line with the spouses, and whenever you're talking on, in governance, they always think she's going to be the CSR person. She's going to be the soft one. That's what we need to change. The language with which I realize the women are seen and heard.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
language has got to change. It's not a narrative, it's a language. That's why I've written 15 research reports and a book, because I have to change the language with which they look at women. And of
Mhm.
course, as an economist, I must say that not using the talent of women is just plain bad
Mhm.
economics.
Mhm.
I just don't get it. I am baffled that they will use every resource in the world, but they will not use the resource of women. And that has a very small word attached to it, which is called trust deficit.
Mhm.
There is a trust deficit. I see it. And I know that the women are not going to make it unless somebody gets up and somebody takes charge of closing that trust
Mhm.
deficit.
Great response. Since you showed me your book, let me ask you a question about your book. Your book is titled Leadership by Proxy. Um, what does leadership by proxy mean? And why does it persist in corporate India even today?
Well, first of all, leadership proxy by means that one half of the world is proxying for the other half.
Hmm.
They will tell us what we think about leadership. They
Hmm.
will tell us what we think about education,
Hmm.
healthcare. They will speak for us. Every panel has got zero representation of women. And
Hmm.
I don't want to talk about small figures of one little woman banker here. It's meaningless to an economist. We are macro thinkers. We don't look at the marginal changes. We look at the macro picture. Which matrix in your matrix, which variable are you going to change? There are no variables to change. The stage is full of men. They're holding all the cards. They're holding all the cards. I'm
Hmm.
repeating it because till today they're holding all the cards.
Hmm.
Therefore, it is leadership by proxy because everybody is proxying for one half of the population that does
Hmm.
not get an opportunity to speak for itself. And
Hmm.
even when it is given an opportunity, it's given an opportunity on things that don't matter that much, like geopolitics, like strategy, like economics, like tariffs. How many times have you ever heard a lady coming up and speaking about tariffs or G7 or G20? You name it. It is leadership by proxy. I have no other
Hmm.
word for it.
Okay. So moving on, let's talk about the Will Forum. You founded this 17 years ago. What gap were you trying to fill that existing institutions were not addressing?
So, who were the existing institutions at that time? So, we're talking about 2007,
Sure.
okay? And I would go to, because I was the regional director of the Conference Board of New York in India for 10 years,
Hmm.
I had a very good rapport with a lot of the Indian CEOs who at that time had only the conference board here, really. And I remember talking to Naren and Murthy and saying to him, you know, I'm going to start this forum for women in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with women. It's about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just try to redefine leadership in the way that it needs to be?
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind enough to give us the boardroom of Infosys. And, you know, we kicked off and launched the Will Forum there. And I bring up this story because even when I went to a Mr. Ramudarai or I went to, say, other CEOs, it was always, but there is no appetite for it. That was the one answer I got.
Mm-hmm.
And I always said, yes, I know there is no appetite.
Mm-hmm.
My job is to make an appetite for what I think is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
We are not business people. We are not going to sell to a market which already exists. We're going to create a market for something that needs to be done. It's a good product. We create a market for a good product.
Sure.
So that is the reason where I felt that a forum like the Will Forum should be there. It wasn't easy. It was really tough. Nobody was interested. Nobody wanted to listen. You know, it was just almost as if I had to do it alone for almost 5 years, one mindset at a time. One mindset at a time. And that, you know, even the CIIs and the FICIs and the flows, and I'm saying it very loudly because there is no reason for me to start the Will Forum if they were already doing the job, but they're not.
Sure.
They're not doing the job.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me, what has surprised you the most about men's engagement in the Will ecosystem?
Well, one of the best compliments I got was maybe about 5, 6 years ago, a little before COVID, when, you know, looking at 15 years of my just hanging in there and saying, no, if you don't do this, you are set up for failure. If the companies do not put the women, they are set up for failure. It's just a matter of time. Not women, but what I meant was equal opportunity, essentially. It's not about the women. And so, you know, I think that even at that time, I understood that it was going to be difficult. But the compliment that I got was, when are you going to start a Will Forum for men? And then I realized, okay, there is a hunger somewhere. And I always talk about the hungry women. Actually, there is a hunger amongst the men too. It was a matter of time for them to come to the point where they decided that, yes, what we're seeing and what we're speaking is called shared humanity. This is not a threat to anybody. The men are part of the story, but they're not the only story.
Correct.
So I found that, you know, when they started talking like this, I realized that there will always be some enlightened men who I'm sorry to say, but I will use a little word called low-hanging fruit. And you could use that low-hanging fruit to bring them into the meeting. But essentially, it's got to be one mindset at a time for men, and that's difficult. I've had to, just like a Rubik cube, you want all the colors in yellow or you want all the colors in red, and you got to work at getting it that way.
Sure.
So I think the time has come. I think the time has come. We want more men in the Will Forum. We want them to raise their hand. I know that they're ready. The question is, they are a little bit hesitant, and I would like to request them not to be hesitant. It's okay.
Well said. I agree with you completely. I mean, I think there must be far, far more empowerment. And I've often asked this question to a lot of women leaders, and I'm going to ask you the same, that, you know, you have found a place at the board table, but do you have a voice? And most of them have said no. So therefore, my question to you is, why does board diversity still face resistance despite overwhelming evidence of its benefits?
Right. And I think you also know that there will be more than 100 companies that are paying a penalty
Correct.
for not having one woman on the board in spite of the SEBI regulation.
Yes.
Therefore, you have to know how deep is the trust deficit. Okay. That should answer your question. The trust deficit is so deep that they are willing to pay fines year after year than to put a woman on the board. And if they do, she will be supposedly safe, she will be comfortable, and she will be invisible. Okay, now the thing is that I've been an independent director on two boards, public listed companies for 8 years.
Mm.
Therefore, it's not that I have not put my boots on the ground. If somebody tells me today, but there are these fantastic companies and the women have a voice, I'm saying, okay, but it's not enough.
Mm.
It's not enough. It's not enough to change the ecosystem into a shared humanity. We don't want to know how many women are on the board. I want to know how many
Correct.
are not on the board. I want to know 88% of board seats are occupied by men. This is the way it should be said.
Yeah.
That's actually the right sentence for an economist to look at. We don't want to know whether it went up from 12 or 13. Who cares? 80% are still occupied by men. What is the problem? There are chartered accountants, there are engineers, these are all women, they've got experience. The problem is that, secondly, so one is the trust deficit. And secondly, I honestly feel that the women who are on boards do not do enough to get more women on boards.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a problem.
Yeah.
And I think it cannot be addressed. I'm not saying it should be addressed. It cannot be addressed. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen them, and I know that they are very covetous
Mm.
of what they have achieved, which, again, like I said, will set them up for failure as far as I'm concerned. If you're not sharing knowledge, what is your knowledge worth? Essentially, it's not even called knowledge. You cannot even call it knowledge if you cannot share it.
Mm.
Thirdly, I think that the women are shy. They are shy because not because they are no good. They're shy because they have this feeling that they will fail. Okay, and that is why they don't go around giving their CVs openly to search firms and executive search firms. But they will come to the Will Forum. They will happily come to our, executive Will Board certification program because they find it safe.
Mm.
Nobody's going to shoot you down if you don't know something is perfectly fine. And so it gives them the first step to get a certificate. Whatever it is, it's a certificate. And I am certifying you, okay? And at least they have somebody and they know I'm giving solidarity and I'm
Mm.
also standing right behind them so they can proceed. That
Mm.
alone gives them the push that
Mm.
they need rather than doing it all on their own. And,
Mm.
solidarity is a big thing, let me tell you.
Mm.
It is a quiet presence that actually speaks a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So therefore, you've talked about trust, a deficit. You have also mentioned that um, women are going up in boardrooms, or they may not necessarily recommend others. My
Mhm.
question is, what myths about women leaders continue to limit their rise to the top?
Okay, so there are actually no myths about women.
Mm.
I don't personally think that. I think the question itself is a myth.
Mhm.
Just to ask this question is a myth.
So
That
what?
what
So what is stopping this whole process? Because I've sat on boards with many women, and yet I do know that it's not enough is happening.
So the thing is that you have to also be realistic and know that the level playing field is not equal.
Hmm.
No matter what you say,
Hmm.
there is no equal opportunity for the women. They have to work harder,
Hmm.
faster, longer, stronger on the same field.
Hmm.
That's what's holding them back. I'm sure that if you had equal level playing field, you would find a lot more women on the table. And actually, I have a word for it in my book. I call it the gender context of leadership.
Hmm.
The gender context of leadership is that your style of leadership, nobody knows what it's like because they don't
Hmm.
know gender context. Our style of leadership will be different from yours.
Hmm.
So it's not what's holding the women back, it's what's holding the companies back from bringing an equal opportunity system where women can come in on their own merit
Hmm.
rather than being through a network or getting to know XYZ or somebody calls the phone. That's how people are appointed on boards. I know it
Hmm.
and you know it.
Hmm.
I think it's fairly, and I'm not counting the two, three sporadic companies. Okay,
Hmm.
that's not for me mainstream. We're
Yeah.
talking mainstream here.
Okay. So therefore, the other aspect I wanted to get your perspective on was that, women directors do have a very positive influence on, and I've experienced this personally, on long-term
Hmm.
governance from my women colleagues, and also on ESG. I'd love to get your thoughts on how do women uniquely influence long-term governance and ESG?
So here's the thing about ESG. I've just finished writing a report on women, boards, and ESG.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm still trying to finish it. Uh, until I write, actually, I cannot speak. I don't feel I have the authority to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I know that in ESG you have 17 SDGs. Gender equity is SDG number 5,
Mm-hmm.
sustainable goal number 5. ESG is now supposedly a huge compliance thing. And everybody's making a lot of money trying to do the ESG compliances, but they never do the compliance on gender equity.
Mm-hmm.
They never do the compliance on SDG 5.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know somebody, please let me know.
Mm-hmm.
Even when the BRSR codes come out, you will find in those 23, 24, I just had a cursory look at them. There will be only 3 or 4 that will be dealing with women.
Mm-hmm.
And that too, they will talk about the social aspect.
Mm-hmm.
They will not talk about equity, which is quite a different matter. So the
Right.
first thing about ESG is that compliance is happening on ESG without SDG 5 being part.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, I think that there can be no ESG, and again, I want to write a report on it. It's called the care economy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this parallel purple economy, which is called the care economy, is the unpaid burden of care that the women are carrying. There can be no future generation, there no Gen Z, no Alpha, until the women take care of the families.
Mm-hmm.
This unpaid work is part of ESG, and we don't see it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. It's got to be part of ESG. You cannot have siloed ESGs, that simply deal with environment and climate. You've got to make sure that you have an equitable ESG compliance code.
Mm-hmm.
And so the women will influence it through all the SDG 16s, whether it has to do with education or healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
It's everywhere. But you got to focus on SDG 5, and you got to focus on the care economy. It should be a board agenda, and no boards are doing it.
Well said.
That's my documentation in front of you.
Wonderful.
They're not doing it.
Wonderful.
They're not
Absolutely.
doing it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I have time for 2 more questions for you, Poonam. If you could redesign leadership education for women, what would you remove and what would you add, or what changes would you make?
Why would I design something which is leadership for women? I would design a course on leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Why would it be for women? So, like I said, the only reason why I'm focused on women, and maybe I will make a pivot now to a larger game plan, which also is, like I said, for the men, because it's never been about women for me. So we must focus on what are the traits of leadership, and that is where I started my presentation. We got to give a greater amount of time out of these little boxes on leadership courses. And we must attend to value, purposefulness, visibility, strategy, presence, open thinking. We got to remove all these things. And this whole thing about find your North Star, it's not, I don't even know what these things mean.
Mm-hmm.
You have to align your compass. That for me is a better sentence. I would go and teach align your compass, because it has to do with a lot of your inner self, rather than looking for a North Star outside, which is different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to align your compass in leadership. And the only way people like you or me like this is because we're aligning our compass every day, every single day. We reboot, we refresh, we align our compass every day. There is nothing to follow a North Star. And that's the first thing I would remove out of any leadership curriculum. The basic fundamental point would be, how are you going to align your compass? What are the components that go into it? And, courage, conviction, all of it come below that. They will come below.
Mm-hmm.
They are not fundamental elements. I hope somebody asks me to design. And if it is women, I would add 2, 3 more additional boxes. Of course, one would definitely be the gender context of leadership. Because if you were to demonstrate courage, which is an essential component of leadership, the men will demonstrate it differently. The women will demonstrate it differently.
Sure.
The manifestation of the elements of leadership are different for men and different for women.
Sure.
That is something that in a leadership course, the men need to understand and the women need to understand.
Correct.
That, if you had an interview and they were all men on the panel, and there was a lady interviewing, you probably won't even know her, that she's a leader, because you don't know how to recognize red nail polish as a CFO. You don't know. You're only looking for a black suit as a CFO, but tomorrow's CFO, or rather today's, are wearing red nail polish. So how are you going to see that leadership style? It'll be an oversight for you.
Great response. And the last question: what is one uncomfortable truth about leadership and gender we are still avoiding as a society?
That the gender problem persists. There is a gender governance gap. And I'm not only talking about leadership. I said gender governance gap.
Correct.
Whether you look at the G7 or the G20 or the BRICS or the EU, there is a governance gap. And I don't think it's sustainable. I'm saying it after so many years of work that I know it's not sustainable. I could write a whole book on why it's not sustainable. So what are you overlooking? You're just overlooking the gender governance gap. You just don't even,
Sure.
I open the newspaper every single day and I see pages full of men every single day deciding the future of half the population who's not on the page. You're simply overlooking the problem itself, is what I'm trying to say.
Well said.
You're just trying to do a little, cosmetic work on the side and thinking it's a big thing. It's okay. You can waste your time if you want to. It's not going to solve the problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But on that note, Poonam, I just want to say what an amazing conversation this has been with you. I am completely on your side. I've sat on many boards where the composition of boards has changed, not because someone in HR said or because the policy was there, because the board decided that women have to be empowered, and the change was absolutely incredible. I'm also a great supporter and speaker on how important it is to bring the half of the population who have an amazing amount of contribution to make and are beginning to see, but I think it's slow. Thank you for speaking to me. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Pleasure. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
You're already a great will leader. Welcome to the club.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.